Have you ever bought something online from another country? Or, just traveled abroad? Well, if you have, you've walked right through an invisible legal minefield without even knowing it. Today, we're going to decode the secret rulebook that keeps our totally interconnected world from falling into complete and utter chaos. So, let's get into it.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at the problem itself, what happens when legal worlds collide. Then we'll uncover the rulebook designed to fix it, and we'll see it really boils down to two key questions. We'll even look at a super fascinating case to see it all in action, and finally, we'll tie it all together and see why any of this actually matters in your daily life.
All right, let's set the stage. Just try to imagine a situation where laws from different countries get all tangled up. What do you even do then?
Seriously, think about it. You're sitting in your home country, but the company you bought from is all the way over in Germany. Do you sue them in your local court? Do you have to fly to a German one? Who's going to pay for what? Yeah, it gets messy, and it gets messy fast.
Okay, let's add a few more layers to this. The company that owns the ship is from Panama, you might be from the US, and the injury itself happened in international waters. So, are you protected by American law, Panamanian law, or, and this is the scary part, maybe no law at all?
And here's a real head-scratcher for you. The person is from one country, but all their stuff, their property, is in another. Which country gets the final say on their will? And look, this is not just some hypothetical classroom question. We are absolutely going to come back to this exact scenario later.
These situations sound pretty chaotic, right? Just a total legal mess. But luckily, there is an entire field of law that is dedicated to sorting out this exact kind of problem.
It's called conflict of laws, or sometimes you'll hear it called private international law. You can think of it like a legal compass. Whenever a case has some kind of foreign element, a person, a company, or property from another country, this is the rulebook a court uses to navigate the storm and figure out which way to go.
And believe it or not, this whole complicated field really just boils down to a simple two-step journey that every court has to take. First up is jurisdiction. Do we even have the power to hear this case in the first place? And if the answer is yes, then comes step two, choice of law. Okay, we can hear it, but whose rulebook are we actually going to use to decide it?
So let's tackle that first step, jurisdiction. Because before anyone can even start making arguments, a court has to decide if it's the right venue for the fight.
At its core, jurisdiction is all about power. It's about a court's legal authority over the people involved and the subject of the fight. If a court doesn't have jurisdiction, any decision it makes is, well, pretty much worthless. It's absolutely crucial to establish that this specific court has the right to make a ruling that everyone has to follow.
But, and this is where it gets really interesting, jurisdiction has this fascinating escape hatch. It's a Latin term, forum non conveniens, which literally means the forum is not convenient. This allows a court that technically has the power to hear a case to still say, you know what, this whole thing would be much, much better handled somewhere else. Maybe all the witnesses and the evidence are in another country. The court can actually just dismiss the case and tell everyone to go to the more appropriate court.
Okay, so the court has decided it can hear the case. It has jurisdiction. Now comes the main event. Which country's laws are they actually going to apply? This right here is the real heart of the conflict.
Now, a long time ago, the approach here was super rigid. For a personal injury case, courts would just use a rule called lex loci delicti, which just means you apply the law of the place where the injury happened. Simple, right? But think about it. What if two people from New York get into a car crash while on a quick day trip to New Jersey? Does it really make sense for New Jersey law to decide everything? The modern way is so much more flexible. Courts now use something called a most significant relationship test, where they ask which place really has the deepest connection to the problem. They look at where the people are from, where their relationship is centered, all these different factors to get a much fairer outcome.
So that's the theory, but let's see how this stuff actually plays out in the real world. Hey, remember that inheritance puzzle from the beginning? Let's dive into the actual case. This is the famous case of Aznar versus Garcia. Here's the setup. An American citizen from California dies while he's living in the Philippines, and he leaves behind a ton of property over there. The question for the court in the Philippines seems simple enough. Who gets the inheritance? But the answer? Well, the answer created this completely mind-bending legal loop.
So the Philippine court starts by looking at its own rulebook. Article 16 of its civil code says that for inheritance, you're supposed to apply the national law of the person who died. Okay, the man was from California, so simple. The court has to apply California law. Case closed, right?
Not so fast. Here's the wild twist. When the Philippine court looks at California's conflict of laws rules,
it finds a huge surprise. California law says that for inheriting property, you should use the law of the place where the property is. And where's the property? It's in the Philippines. So California law points right back to the Philippines.
And this is a perfect, if bizarre, example of a legal phenomenon called renvoy. It's basically a legal hall of mirrors. The Philippines says use California law, and California law says, nope, you use Philippine law. They're just pointing back and forth at each other forever.
I mean, if each country's law just tells you to follow the other one, how does a court ever make a decision? Who breaks the tie?
Well, the Philippines Supreme Court finally just cut the knot. It basically said, look, when our rule pointed to California law, we meant California's internal law, the rules for how you actually divide up property, not its tricky conflict rule that points us back here. So by just ignoring that look-back instruction, it applied its own domestic law and finally settled the inheritance.
Now that might all seem like some complicated, abstract legal puzzle, but the principles behind it are literally the invisible framework that makes our modern, globalized life even possible.
I mean, just think about it. Every single time you buy something from an international seller or travel to another country or even work remotely for a foreign company, conflict of laws is working away in the background. It makes sure contracts are valid across borders, it protects you if you get hurt, it even figures out which country's labor laws apply to you. It is the silent but absolutely essential engine of our connected world.
And that leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. Conflict of laws is a brilliant patch, right? It helps all these different legal systems work together. But as our world gets smaller and more connected every single day, is patching things up really enough? Or are we slowly heading towards a future where a single, global set of rules isn't just a cool idea, but an absolute necessity?